Zoom just does that to us occasionally, as you know. Right, okay. So obviously, thank you very much for the introduction and the invitation to speak tonight. Before I start, though, I mean, go into any detail of this topic. I'm just going to give you an introduction to myself and my background, and for those that have not come across me, explain a little bit of why I'm here talking to you this evening. I've been fortunate enough to have had two long-term employers, Dorset County Council and Dorset and Wiltshire Fire Rescue Service. I started with Dorset County Council in 1984. Initially, I was employed as a countryside ranger, which is very relevant to this topic, but I ended up managing a team of geographical information systems developers. I was made redundant from Dorset County Council in 2018, but I've also enjoyed a 38-year-long career in the fire service. I'm currently a station commander for Dorset and Wiltshire Fire Rescue Service. I'm also a National Wildfire Tactical Advisor for the National Fire Chiefs Council. I've specialised in wildfires, I guess, since about 1998, and have been fortunate enough to work all around the world on wildfires. I regularly go to California. I've worked in Oregon on TREX, which is a wildfire training exchange program. I've been to South Africa, where I've researched large-scale ignition patterns, and around Europe, and most recently in Greece, where I helped to assess one of their unfortunately fatal wildfires in Mati. I'm currently a senior research fellow in the wildfire lab at the University of Exeter. And on top of that, in my spare time, if you like, I run my own wildfire training and consultancy business, WildlifeTaC. I'm currently the only LANTRA wildfire instructor in the UK. Although I've said that I'm a firefighter, I should point out that this evening I am speaking in my private capacity. I'm not representing any other organisation. So, what is a wildfire? We really need to start with a definition, I suppose. Well, this definition is pretty much accepted around the globe, and it is any unwanted vegetation fire. It's as simple as that. On the screen, we have the definition from the Fire Rescue Service National Operational Guidance for Wildfire. The 5 criteria listed are for significant wildfires that have to be recorded in the National Reporting Tool. This ensures that this is brought to the attention of the National Wildfire Team, including myself as a National Wildfire Tactical Advisor. In addition, the Fire Rescue Service record every incident, regardless of size, in the National Incident Recording System. But defining wildfires is the easy bit. Controlling them is a different matter. And again, are wildfires a problem? Well, these statistics are for England only. And fire rescue services across England attend approximately 32,000 wildfires per year. Approximately 4,600 hectares are destroyed every year. And fire rescue services spend on average 38,000 hours a year fighting wildfires. It is estimated that approximately 50% of these are deliberate. Nearly all are human caused, either through accident, neglect, or deliberately. So yes, wildfires are a significant problem for the Fire and Rescue Service, as well as the landowners and land managers. 38,000 hours of fire service time spent fighting wildfires means that the response to other emergencies is delayed during those 38,000 hours. This inevitably puts lives at risk. Has become rather contentious, certainly in recent years, partly because land managers have lost their traditional skills. However, it was integral to the creation and maintenance of heathlands in particular over many hundreds of years. Recent new legislation has restricted the use of prescribed fire over deep peat, that's peat that's greater than 40 centimetres in depth, and is also controlled by the heather and grass burning regulations for England. I'm currently working on the creation of a UK wildfire and prescribed fire training standard for DEFRA. This will help land managers and foresters acquire licenses to burn under the new regulations. In Dorset, we've set up a prescribed fire group that uses prescribed fire as a management tool. It's proving very successful. Prescribed fires burn on our terms and under our control. This is a prescribed fire on Forestry Commission land. And they, along with the National Trust and the RSPB, are the core of the Dorset Prescribed Fire Group. We'll look at prescribed fires in more detail a little later on, but we tend to burn probably 4 or 5 days a year at the moment, and we're looking to expand that program to become much more extensive. Okay, what are the consequences of wildfire? There are many and varied, and everybody has their own take on this, and this list is certainly not a complete list. We've got things like habitat loss, wildlife casualties, carbon loss, particularly from that deep peat, air pollution, public health, infrastructure damage, travel disruption, roads, railways, airports all get closed frequently. Drinking water quality can be affected. Upon the moors, the liberation of industrial revolution contaminants such as heavy metal, both into the air and into the drinking water. Tourism can be affected, actually positively and negatively. There is a wildfire tourism where people go to see both the fires and the aftermath, but of course, people also don't really want to go to areas that have been recently burnt. The economy is affected. Crops can be lost, whether that's a forest plantation or whether that's standing corn, etc. Livestock, industrial and domestic properties, emergency service resources, as we've already mentioned, can be drained, and of course, human life, to name but a few. I'm sure you'll all have your own list. You may want to add to that perhaps in the discussion later. So what causes wildfires in the UK? Well, it's very rarely natural. There is only one official record of lightning starting a wildfire in the UK. We know more happened, but only one has ever been recorded. Lightning strikes and natural causes may become a bigger influence as we move forward under the new regime of climate change. But for the here and now, we have little real evidence. Often cited as causes are discarded cigarettes, broken glass, bottles, the concave bases of tin cans, barbecues, campfires, etc. While all are theoretically possible, in reality we can rule out cigarettes, broken glass, bottles and tin cans. The evidence simply isn't there. Roadside ignitions are more likely to be from ceramic fragments from catalytic converters than cigarettes. Some fires are undoubtedly caused by friction and sparks from agricultural machinery. Some are escape bonfires or escape prescribed fires. However we look at this, there are 3 main causes of vegetation fires in the UK. Men, women, and children. Whilst of course accepting that gender stereotypes are becoming more fluid nowadays. It's not just as simple as that, and there are numerous other factors involved. If we accept that people are the primary cause, then we need to look at the influencing factors in more detail. We'll start by looking at a short case study based on Parley Common in Dorset. For those familiar with National Airport, to the east is now a large solar energy farm. The south is a light industrial area, often with industries related to the airport. There's also a school. To the north and west is the rural urban interface wrapped around a golf course. As with most heathlands in Dorset and the south of England, Parley Common is a site of special scientific interest. This is shown on the map as a purple hatched area, but really almost anywhere that's heathland in the south of England is going to have a designation of one kind or another. The Urban Heaths Partnership is a long-standing collaboration between various local authorities, conservation groups such as Dorset Wildlife Trust, Reptile and Amphibian and Reptile Conservation, National Trust, RSPB, etc., as well as the police and Dorset Wiltshire Fire Rescue Service. It was established as an EU Life Natura project in about 2000 and has since grown into a permanently staffed partnership to manage and mitigate damaging acts to SSSI heathland sites in the southeast of Dorset. It maps all damaging acts, including fires. This is a terrific resource, and it's a very rare resource in the UK. This slide shows all of the fires recorded at Parley Common by the Urban Heath Partnership. There are clear clusters, and we need to think about and try to understand why. You can see the clusters mostly to the north of the slide. The Urban Heath Partnership also record and map access points and tracks for light vehicles. These tracks are not open to the public, but are maintained for land management and firefighting access. Of course, the public access the site from many unofficial points and walk as far as they are interested in walking. Like many similar sites, its recreational uses include walking, cycling, BMX, motorcycles, horse riding, etc. But it's mostly somewhere to exercise, to walk, and to empty the dog. To try to understand the clusters and personally knowing a little about the general demographics of the area, I thought that it would be useful to consider the indices of multiple deprivation. So I've mapped this and color coded it by deprivation. You'll see the numbers on the screen, and the lower the number, the more deprived the area is considered to be. So really quite affluent to the south and rather deprived to the north. If we then add the fires and antisocial behaviour, we can see that by far the highest concentration of fires is to the north, adjacent to the more deprived areas. This pattern is repeated around the rural-urban interface, or RUI as we now call it, but this is only part of the picture. We need to consider many other factors to determine when and where wildfires might start. We should also recognise that not everyone from a deprived background is a fire setter. Far from it. Many of our volunteer wardens are from this same demographic. In my research role at the Wildfire Lab, I've considered many factors that need to align before we start to see wildfire ignitions. The time of year is important, and this general pattern is from data collected between 2007 to 2020. It's based on Dorset data, but reflects the general trend throughout the UK and probably Northern Europe. This is a record of successful ignitions that resulted in wildfires. Of course, it doesn't show how many unsuccessful attempts at ignition there were. It's important to note that March and April see the start of the UK wildfire season. This is because the fuels are at their driest after the winter, with very little new green growth in them. It peaks in April before it tails off. There are exceptions, but this is the current trend, and we're waiting to see the impact of climate change, though I don't think that we're going to have to wait very long. We can also see from the same data set the time of day that ignitions are successful. Clearly, this is linked to fine fuel moisture content and the relative humidity, the amount of moisture in the air and in the fuel. As the day warms up and dries out, attempted ignitions become more successful. There is also a little peak around school kicking out time. Working with the Natural Hazard Partnership, we've created a set of values based on the European Forest Fire Index system. This uses elements of the Fire Danger Rating System. The Fire Danger Rating System is based on the Canadian system that uses dead material found in lodgepole pine plantations. It's not ideal for the UK, but it's the best that is currently available. This system produces a red, amber, yellow system to assist local resilience forums and fire rescue services to prepare for wildfire ignitions in the UK. You don't need to read or even understand the values on the screen. They're just to demonstrate that we have some and that we don't just make it up. My current research is part of a 4-year Natural Environment Research Council funded project to create a UK fire rating system that will further refine these values using UK-based data and UK fuels, which mostly burn when they're green, not when they're dead. So far, the UK has not had a red alert issued for wildfire, but we are seeing amber in use more frequently, and we expect red to appear on a heathland site near you soon. Climate change is breaking weather records year on year, and this can only be detrimental to the UK in wildfire terms. As already discussed in the Parley Common example, the indices of multiple deprivation is a key component in wildfire ignitions in an urban setting. In this map, the darker the colour, the more affluent. So light colours indicate poverty and deprived communities. It is clear that all you need is fuel. In this case, that's lowland heath. And where this is adjacent to a deprived community, you will get ignitions. And again, you can see the clusters sit directly on top of the fuel blocks, the heathland areas, particularly clustered in those deprived areas. But how does this pan out in rural settings? Well, the picture is more complex. This is a map of part of Purbeck. The picture is more complex in rural areas and does not depend on the proximity of deprived communities. Initially, the ignitions appear quite random, but if you add in the highway network, a loose pattern starts to emerge. But it's only when you add in the footpaths that you can see that the fires are directly linked to human activity. It also seems that the population, or at least the fire setting population, don't like to walk too far from the path or their car. Normally, it's less than 100 meters. So I think we can agree that wildfires are a problem in the UK. But what can we expect from climate change, and what can we do about it, if anything? In 2018, I was sent to Mati, a small town in Greece. I was sent by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to help the understand what happened in that little town. This was a landscape scale wildfire that killed 104 people. Some were trapped in their homes, some in their cars trying to escape. Others simply became disoriented and were caught in the open by the fire. Others fled into the sea where they later drowned. This was a real tragedy, and some of you may have seen this unfold on the television, as there was quite extensive news coverage. These fatal wildfires are becoming more common year on year. As climate change moves forward, our climate is set to become more Mediterranean and more fire prone. Last year, we saw several large wildfires in our part of the world: Wareham Forest, Thursley Common, Chobham Common, and Ringwood Forest, to name but a few, in the south of England. The UK has experienced all of its largest ever recorded wildfires in the past 5 or 6 years. Is this the shape of things to come for the UK and temperate Europe? In recent years, we've seen an increase in the number of homes and structures being lost to wildfires. This first image is from March of this year, where a number of homes were threatened by a wildfire in Wales. You can see the damage to the fences and the gardens. The second photo is from Little Marlow in Essex from 2018. This fire spread from a field of stubble over a main road and into a small industrial estate. It destroyed a home, several industrial units and vehicles, plus severely damaging a garden centre. Wildfires damaging homes doesn't just happen in other countries. It is happening here and now, and is likely to get worse. Do we have any answers? For the UK at present, I'm not sure that we do. There are many lessons that we could learn from around the globe. I've travelled extensively to learn these lessons. I've taken part in firefighting, in training, in research, and I've just listened to people that want to talk about wildfires and their experiences. Unfortunately, there is a reluctance in the UK to listen to others. We have to do it our way. We have to learn our own lessons. One thing that I'm certain about is that just fighting wildfires will not work. We've been fighting them for hundreds of years. Before that, we used to live with them and manage them. I'm convinced that we have to go back before we can move forward. We have to relearn how to live with fire and how to manage wildfire. Suppression only it works once mitigation has taken place. I'll use Smokey Bear as an example. Many of you will be familiar with Smokey Bear, I'm sure. The United States Forest Service realized during World War II that their forests were a real concern and an easy target for attack. The Forest Fire Service staff were mostly overseas, and they saw forest fires as a vulnerability. As a result, they started a public service campaign to prevent forest fires, the Smokey Bear campaign. This fell in line with pre-war campaigns to stop all forest fires. Donald and Brown released a paper in 2007 to highlight that the suppression of all fires was not allowing the natural processes to take place. Fuels building up, forests were becoming overstocked and unhealthy, whereas in a natural ecosystem, small, low-intensity lightning fires were a regular occurrence. The new megafires were now becoming increasingly large, high-intensity, highly destructive fires that could not be suppressed. It is time to reevaluate and consider how to redress the balance, not just in America, but across the globe. Most national parks in America now allow natural start fires to burn. They only intervene when necessary to save life or property. I'm certainly not suggesting that the UK has the same problem directly as the States on the same scale, but we do need to consider, is Smokey in the UK? So do we have a Smokey Bear problem here? The State of the South Downs National Park 2012 report states that of its 1,544 hectares of lowland heath, only 19% are assessed as being in favourable or good healthy condition. This suggests that the remaining 81% are in poor condition, and much of this could be overstood with very high fuel loads. This is detrimental to the health of the heathland and makes suppression very difficult with poor access and high intensity fires. So I guess that you can say, yes, Smokey Bear is here, and we really need to send him packing and reconsider how we manage particularly our heathland and high fuel areas. Currently, our greatest wildfire concern is for heath and moor. Here in the south, this is mostly lowland heath. So let's focus on that. Heathlands developed about 3,500 years ago as the result of slash and burn. Forests were cleared to create rough grazing and kept open by continued grazing and burning. Some products were harvested, such as heather for thatch and bedding, and gorse for fuel. If we stop these traditional forms of management, can we expect heathland to continue in the same way? Heathlands only occur naturally in exposed coastal areas where tree growth is naturally suppressed. The lack of traditional management has led to many heathlands falling into poor condition, with much reduced biodiversity. Other than recreation and conservation, there are no tangible products from heathland. This presentation is about the impacts of wildfire. Well, not all impacts are necessarily negative. I said earlier that I would discuss prescribed fire in more detail. If we are to learn to live with fire, then it needs to be on our terms as much as possible. Fire has been a traditional form of heathland management for hundreds of years, but has become neglected since the middle of the 20th century. We'll never return to fully traditional forms of heathland management, but prescribed fire is cheap and effective. It also actively contributes to biodiversity in a way that simply mowing can't. In Dorset, I've been working with bug life and other conservation projects to improve habitats for specific species, such as those illustrated here. The lesser butterfly orchid, the pale dog violet, the Dartford warbler, and the Purbeck mason wasp, all of which benefit from fire. For example, The lesser butterfly orchid is drowning in Molinia grass and now only remains on one site in Dorset. This is a boggy area that is difficult to manage. Grazing was introduced to try to reduce the Molinia, but the cattle didn't eat the tough old Molinia and favoured the succulent green orchid shoots. I was asked to find a way to burn off the old Molinia without polluting the areas of standing water. This I did, and the following spring there was an early flush of green growth. The cattle moved in and cropped the grass before moving on, just as the orchid shoots appeared. The number of orchids doubled in year one. We burnt again the following winter in an attempt to extend the range of the orchids further into the bog. We also noticed an increase in early marsh orchid and heath spotted orchid in the same area. Dartford warblers like a nice mixed heathland with a mosaic of habitats for feeding, displaying, nesting and shelter. Prescribed fire creates exactly this mosaic, which is also enjoyed by many other species. It was noticed that there was always an increase in the number of purbeck mason wasps after wildfires. After some initial research, it was discovered that their prey species, a moth, benefits from the areas of open ground and short vegetation after a severe wildfire. I was asked to create areas of high severity prescribed fire to create these areas of bare soil. Monitoring is still ongoing and we await the results, particularly for the purbeck mason wasp, but many of these species will require several years of management before we really see hopefully the positive impact of our work. The rotational removal of high fuel loads such as gorse and Molinia can have a significant impact on reducing both wildfire intensity and severity. We have to accept that we cannot prevent wildfires. We can educate and try to reduce the number of ignitions, but we will always have fires and may see an increase in the number of natural lightning strike fires. But if we can reduce the fuel load on our terms during the winter when reptiles are tucked away and birds are not nesting, then we have a chance to be able to manage the wildfires. With less fuel available for a wildfire, it will burn with less intensity and fall into the suppression capability of the fire and rescue service. Birds, reptiles, amphibians, mammals, and people all suffer as a result of wildfires. There are very few winners. Here are a few examples from my extensive collection of dead wildlife as a result of wildfires. They're all disturbing, but I've been careful to avoid those that could cause real distress, and unfortunately I do see too many of those images. We have a couple of golden-ringed dragonflies, a rescued sand lizard, a destroyed clutch of Dartford warbler eggs, and a common toad. Possibly the only winners here are the birds, especially the raptors that feast on toasted invertebrates, and the creatures such as the sand lizard that survive the fire but have nowhere to hide. For unexplainable reasons, some days I can find dozens of dead creatures at wildfire, but on other days I find absolutely nothing. Because of the time of year and the high fuel levels, wildfires are often very difficult to control. I've been fighting them for many years, and I've attended a number in Surrey, including Ash Ranges, I think it was 2015, Thursley Common and Chobham Common, both of which occurred again last year. Aside from these, I've attended many fires in my home county of Dorset, and I was deployed to the Saddleworth Moor fire in 2018. I actually stood on Saddleworth Moor while that was burning and looked across, and I could see Winter Hill also burning, two major incidents running side by side simultaneously within easy view of each other, both emptying all of their pollutants directly onto Manchester. These fires are becoming more frequent, larger, and more difficult to control. As I've already alluded to, we have to stop fighting fires and start to manage them. This begins with listening. Listen to those that have been facing these fires frequently in different parts of the world. As firefighters, we'll never win, even with the use of new tools and techniques. Last year at Wareham Forest, I organised a number of firsts for Dorset and Wiltshire Fire Rescue Service. the first time a bulldozer had been utilised, the first time a helicopter had been used for firefighting, and the first time that we deployed a tactical burn team to suppress a wildfire. Just a few weeks later, I was at Chobham Common and again deployed a bulldozer to the fire ground, this time on a golf course. These techniques will become unless we start to manage our wildfires before they even ignite. We need to change the way we manage the land and consider fuel load. We can use grazing, mowing, mulching and burning as part of the mitigation works. We need to train land managers in planning for wildfire, and we need to train the fire and rescue service in new techniques to bring these under control. Ideally, both should be involved in both parts of that. Fire service could be involved in the mitigation works. As they are in Wales, firefighters regularly cut fuel breaks and fuel, and land managers can be incorporated into the firefighting arena, again with careful consideration with correct training. Sometimes these new techniques may mean sacrificing some areas of land to save others or to save homes. By working closely, the land management sector and the fire and rescue services can improve the way we manage wildfires. As residents living alongside fire-prone landscapes, we need to change our practices as well. I'd like to spend a few minutes on Firewise UK. To give a little background, I had attended an international wildfire conference in May 2011, where I also took part in a Firewise workshop. I was very impressed and wanted an opportunity to introduce it into the UK. I returned to South Africa a couple of weeks later in June and was working on a wildfire research project in the Kruger National Park, which kept me there for a month. While I was there, Upton Heath in Dorset suffered a significant wildfire, which led to the evacuation of many homes. When I returned from South Africa, my chief fire officer asked me what could be done. We met and agreed a plan of action based on the Upton Heath fire. I was asked to visit all residents living within the rural-urban interface to discuss a Firewise type approach, and we created the UK's first wildfire safety leaflet based around the Firewise principles. This was the start of Firewise in the UK. Firewise is a simple concept where homeowners are encouraged to take control of their wildfire risk. Most homes are ignited by embers from a wildfire. By keeping your home in good shape, you can mitigate this risk. Tasks such as regularly clearing the debris from your gutters or maintaining your garden plants in good order. If you store outside furniture or logs, etc. against your home, or perhaps if you have a deck that is open-sided, then all of this is fuel for a wildfire. Fine fuels such as leaves and twigs will accumulate in these areas and under the deck and are easily ignited by embers. Breaking up the continuity of fuel close to your home is a simple step to keeping it safe from wildfires. Other fire and rescue services became interested in Firewise, and the National Fire Chiefs Council reached an agreement with the National Fire Protection Association to be able to use Firewise under licence. In 2014, the UK's first official Firewise community was launched by Michelle Steinberg of the NFPA at Thursley Village in Surrey. As many of you all know, Thursley Common regularly suffers from wildfires that have threatened homes in the past and have also caused injuries to firefighters. Firewise UK has now become more structured. UK staff are in place within the Urban Heath Partnership in Dorset. They're supported by the National Fire Protection Association in America and meet with them regularly online. Only a couple of weeks ago, we had an online webinar similar to this, dedicated to Firewise UK, which was fully booked and attended by more than 80 people. I was one of the speakers, and the recording is available to view online. More communities are showing interest in Firewise UK and are signing up. Already this year, we've seen many large fires around the UK. Many of these are on the rural-urban interface and have threatened homes. With the likely impacts of climate change, now is the time to consider your position and take action to prepare your own homes. As I said earlier, I've been involved in Firewise from the very start, and last year, Firewise UK, the Beacon Road Firewise community, and the University of Exeter teamed up to research the flammability of garden plants. The residents provided samples of the plants from their own gardens, which were then analysed in an icone calorimeter. This measures the time to ignition and the peak heat release rate, amongst other things. From this, it is possible to determine which plants are more fire prone and which are more fire resistant, and which plants may generate intense flame lengths beyond 2.5 metres. These intense flames are more difficult for the fire rescue service to suppress. The results were fed back to the residents to help them make informed choices about the plants that they should choose or avoid. Research and community involvement like this will help us to better understand the real risk of wildfires in the UK. On the screen, you can see, to the left of the screen, sorry, you can see callistemon being weighed before being burnt in the icone calorimeter. The graph in the centre shows the simplified results of the samples that we burnt. A red, amber, green code is used, with red as being the high intensity, through to green being the lower intensities. The graph in the top right-hand corner shows these results displayed as expected flame length. Anything above or to the right of the solid red line on this chart will be very difficult for the fire rescue service to extinguish because it generates flame lengths in excess of 2.5 metres. But Firewise is about the community. This may just be a few homes, fairly isolated homes perhaps in a large heathland area. It could be an entire street, or it could be a collection of streets. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever the community needs it to be. The Beacon Road Firewise community are a really good example of what this really looks like. They hold preparation days where they help each other. The more able people help the less able people. They clear leaves from gutters to remove the fuel. Plants that are too big or too close to homes are tidied up, trimmed, pruned, and so on. They talk to each other, along with the fire rescue service and the local land managers. Perhaps most importantly, just getting to know each other and discussing a common concern over tea and cake. One of the key steps forward they made was their first contact, rather similar to the image down in the lower left corner, where the land manager was talking over the back garden fences, and they started to have this dialogue around their concerns about the fuel that was on the heathland. This image you're looking at on the lower left corner actually shows reasonably well kept fuel break. But prior to this time, the gorse particularly was right up to the back garden fences. When the land managers understood, they organised volunteer working parties with the residents of that community to actually go out and to manage the heathland in a way that broke up and reduced the fuel load close to their homes. Of course, they have to balance that with the conservation requirements of the site, but having that dialogue, having that communication was the first most important step. And now they regularly work together and help to manage and maintain that risk around their homes. We need more communities to become Firewise. This will help mitigate the impacts of wildfire and help people feel safer in their homes. Before I close, I just want to share the story of Darlene's home. I met Darlene on the 12th of September 2015. We were at a Firewise meeting at Middletown Fire Station in Lake County, California. As you can see, Darlene has a lovely home nestled in the forest. It is of typical construction for the area. They tend to have stone chimneys, and the rest of the house is made of timber, and often with a shingle roof, though many now have felt shingle roofs. The 12th of September 2015 was the day of the Valley Fire. I was working with a colleague from CAL FIRE, Chief Greg Bratelli. We were the first 2 people to reach the seat of the Valley Fire at 13:32. Within an hour, we had requested assistance in the form of 1 staging area manager, 10 division supervisors, 50 fire engines, 24 hand crews, 14 bulldozers, 16 air tankers, 1 helicopter attack crew, 3 firefighting helicopters, 2 ambulances, and 2 air ambulances. 4 of my colleagues from the WildlifeTaC crew had been burnt over and seriously injured. I assisted in treating their injuries before they were helivaced away. By this time, Darlene's home looked like this. The fire grew for several days, becoming the 3rd most destructive fire in California's history at that time. It doesn't even make the top 10 now. It had burnt to an area of 118 square miles and destroyed 1,958 properties, killing 6 people. By this time, Darlene's home looked like this. I try to return every year to see how people like Darlene are coping and how these communities are returning to normal. I also try to spend a couple of weeks with the Middletown crew fighting fires when I can. I was actually in California with the crew when lockdown started, and I was kicked out of America last year. So that was the last time I saw them. The key thing is we must continue to learn and to listen to those, particularly those that have gone before us and those that have had to deal with these incidents. Again, I'm not suggesting our fire problem here at the moment is anywhere near to that of California. But in California, they have many, many fires similar to ours, the same type of size, and they have lots of lessons that we can learn. The same lessons that we can learn from Australia, from Canada, from New Zealand, from South Africa, from Spain, from Portugal, and the list goes on. Well, thank you for your time and for listening. I hope that you found this part of the evening interesting and useful. I'm going to hand you back now to Sophie, and she'll explain whether we're taking questions now or towards the end. We've still got another presentation to come from Ben, which I'm also looking forward to.
Thank you.
I'll stop sharing my screen a minute for you, Sophie, as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andy. I don't know how anyone else is feeling, but I found that quite hard to watch. Remarkable job you do, and thank you. And it's so educational. We have had a few questions in actually, which I feel it would be appropriate to address now. One that one of our lovely members has asked, and a couple of people have said yes, they want to know the answer to. As what should we do as individuals if we see a wildfire? Should we try and put it out if it is small?
Okay, it's a great question. And there are 2 things I'll say. First thing always is your safety. Do you feel safe is the first thing you need to ask yourself. If you feel safe and if you feel able to tackle that fire, then you may want to do that. But what are you going to tackle it with? What do you have to hand? So always dial 999, call the fire service, give your location. That is the first thing you do. Okay. Once you've done that, if you're not feeling safe, leave. Just leave the area. Ideally, get back to the road and then help direct the fire rescue service in. If you have the capability, the means to extinguish a small fire, then and if it's safe for you to do it, then do it. But I've seen small fires turn big very, very quickly. And I've dedicated a large chunk of my life training people how to stay alive in that situation. So please don't feel obliged to fight a wildfire. If it is something you can just kick out and you're happy to do it, then great. Still call the fire service. Okay, still call the fire service. They'll come and put water on it and douse it and make sure it's out. But the most important thing, first thing, 999. Good location if you can. We've got, most of us now have access to apps like What 3 Words on our phone. All emergency services will take a What 3 Words location. or a grid reference, or just a descriptor, just whatever you can, the best location you could possibly give, withdraw to the road and meet the fire service, direct them into the incident.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andy. Quite early on in your presentation, a couple of people have commented about the links between demographics and incidents of wildfire. And someone's asked, are there similar studies elsewhere that this one can be compared to? I'm assuming that was compared to something really sort of specific in your earlier presentation. And the same person has asked, has anyone studied the psychology of deliberate fire setting? I find it inexplicable. I'm with you, Christine, on that. And fascinating questions, both of them. Thank you.
Yeah, the demographic element. Yes, there are people that have looked at it elsewhere in other parts of the world. And in fact, if I just jump back to California for a second, most people have the Hollywood image of California. The vast majority of California is totally the opposite end of the spectrum. Huge areas of deprivation. Having worked there as a firefighter, it was a shock to me, the levels of deprivation. And again, these are often areas where the urban interface fires start, in the areas of deprivation. It's not to say that everybody living in a deprived area, as I said earlier, is a fire setter, and it is far from it. We get lots of help from those communities, but you've got often large numbers of people that often have, well, they don't have excess money to go off and spend on recreation elsewhere, so they make their own recreation. And unfortunately, some of that can lead to antisocial behaviour. It could just be the use of motorcycles and so on, all of which can start fires on heath. And fire setting is one of those things. So there is a link between the demographic and all sorts of antisocial behaviour, including fire setting. The second part of the question around the psychology, I mean, yes, there are people that make a living literally just trying to understand and analyse and actually coach people. And nearly every fire service in the UK has what they call a fire setters course, which is to try and catch young people. I don't mean catch as in apprehend, I mean catch them while their behaviours can be modified, where they've started to show signs of fire setting, to help them understand that and to re-educate them. Unfortunately, it is often true that many fire setters have learning issues, special education needs of different kinds. Many of them are fascinated with fire for different reasons. Some of them have genuine mental illnesses. And again, I'm not making excuses for people, but there are reasons beyond just nuisance and just troublemaking. For some people, it becomes a compulsion. And it's important to find these people and to work with them where we can, and again, try to educate and try to help them, because often they don't want to do it. It becomes a compulsion. They just need to see fire. And I guess there's an arsonist in all of us, or a pyromaniac, not necessarily an arsonist. I think we're all fascinated by fire, and we all like to watch fire, and that goes back a long way in our history. Fortunately, most of us can resist the temptation to start them in an uncontrolled way. But there is a lot of work ongoing. The fire and rescue services offer a lot of assistance to people that do set fires. It's not just about punishment, it is about re-education and trying to help these people.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andy. That was a fascinating question. Thank you for asking that. I'm just going to ask two more questions from the questions that have come in, and then we're going to move swiftly on to Ben's presentation. Rob has asked, what is the likelihood of the UK soon experiencing another drought year like 1976 and its consequent series of wildfires over several months? Are our fire services, which have fewer resources, pumps and firefighters than in 1976, planning for this? That's a brilliant question, and I'm not sure I want to know the answer to that. Thank you.
Okay. I think I said in the presentation that year on year we're breaking records. 76, I can remember 76. It was a truly exceptional year in the number of fires that we had and the scale of those fires. I wasn't a firefighter in 1976, I can just remember it. And it will happen again. We will get another 1976. It is likely to happen more and more often. One of the patterns that we used to see was approximately every 15 years, we used to get a severe wildfire year. Approximately every 5 years, we'd get a difficult wildfire year. So there was that 5 and 15-year rotation. That's now dropped down to at most a 5-year rotation. We're seeing that what we would have called an extreme wildfire year, we're seeing at least one of those within every 5-year block. And it seems that year on year, it's getting worse. So I don't know that we'll ever see the same as 76 because our weather is changing, and the forecast, if you like, for climate change is that we will get hotter, wetter years. So we're going to get those intense thunderstorms will come down in the summer. So the drought period may not be as extensive, but we will see more frequent drought periods. We will see higher temperatures, and we will see wildfires start to grow in numbers and size and intensity. And of course, every now and then you will get that 1976 drought that means that all of the fuel everywhere will burn. During the summer, we get the green up. So in the summer, actually, we often see a drop in the number of wildfires or the intensity of wildfires. They're easier to put out because the fuel is green, it's growing. In a drought year, it doesn't grow as well and it loses moisture, and then it all becomes very, very flammable. Resources was touched on, and preparation. In the last 5-10 years, the fire rescue services have started to wake up to wildfire. They've started to train and prepare for wildfires. There are probably fewer resources around, that's true, but the resources we have are better. The training is better. It has a long way to go, in my personal opinion, but it is improving. We now have the National Wildfire Tactical Advisors. They were only launched last year. In fact, in the middle of the Wareham Forest fire, they were officially launched. So we've got no, I'm telling lies. They were launched in 2018. Something else happened in the middle of the Wareham Forest fire. So it's 2018 they were officially launched. And, you know, we've got, things are moving in the right direction. I still think there's a way to go, but we are improving. And yes, we are talking about and we're preparing for difficult wildfire seasons to come, starting June. There's
Brilliant.
a prediction.
Thank you, Andy. I do feel a little bit more reassured now, personally. Right, just one last question. Sorry, I'm going to sort of have to wrap up this fascinating Q&A session so we can move on for Ben's presentation. Julie has asked, do all parish councils look to sign up to Firewise, or is this something individuals need to do in association with them? That's a brilliant question. Thank you for asking that.
It's a good question. Yeah, again, Firewise is down to communities, and people decide what their community is. It would certainly help if you've got the local parish council on side and supporting you, but any community can approach Firewise UK, and it's easier for people to look that up on a website than me trying, or I can certainly give you links that you might want to share on your website, perhaps. Approach Firewise UK, look it up, and you can start your own community. That's all you need to do. It is about people, and it's just that sharing information, sharing resource. Somebody might have a ladder and the ability to climb up and empty your gutters, where other people might be happy to prune the gardens. So it's about that. Perhaps, you know, old traditional values are looking after each other, this time with a focus on fire. Firewise UK will be delighted to hear from any community who wants to start up. They will send them some information and guide them through the process. And then, yeah, you should be able to start in that way. But if you can get the parish council to back you, even better, because they have a bit more clout and they like to organise things. So, but it does not have to be parish council led or fire service led. It's just about a group of people getting together.
Wonderful. I love that idea. I will definitely sort of look up that up, because I know we've got a talk coming up about community gardening. I think that's actually an essential part of community gardening, all doing it to help each other and wildlife. Wonderful. Thank you for those brilliant questions. And thank you, Andy. That was just a phenomenal presentation. I think I'm going to have nightmares tonight. So I'm going to introduce now our lovely Ben, who works for Surrey Wildlife Trust, who's going to present now. And please do feel free to ask any questions of Ben in the Q&A, and we will ask them to him after he's finished. And if you've suddenly thought of a question for Andy as well, Andy will be staying with us, so do pop them in the Q&A box. Over to you, Ben. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie. Yeah, thank you very much, Andy. As expected, that was an incredible presentation, and it's wonderful to be stood alongside somebody who has such experience. I certainly don't have that amount, and I'm certainly not a wildfire expert. But yes, I hopefully will be able to show you some of the impacts of wildfire on our lowland heath. I just want to check, Sophie, can you see my screen?
I can. It's running beautifully. Thank you.
Superb, excellent. Okay, right. Yes. So my name is Ben Habgood. I'm the conservation manager for Surrey Wildlife Trust on our heathland sites in the Thames Basin Heaths area. And today I'm really talking about the impacts of wildfire on that habitat, on lowland heathland habitat. I know Andy has gone into some detail about lowland heathland and heathland, mentioning moorland as well as upland. So for the context of what we are about in Surrey Wildlife Trust and the areas that we manage, I'll be talking about lowland heathland. I'll be going into some of the detail about what that habitat is, what it consists of. Hopefully you're already aware of some of that, being local or have walked on lowland heathland before, spent some time on lowland heathland habitat. I'll also talk a little bit about the effects of wildfire, but not to some of the technical detail that Andy's talked about. And what we're trying to proactively do in Surrey on our heathlands to manage and prevent wildfire and the extent of wildfire on our heathlands. So as I mentioned, Surrey Wildlife Trust is a land manager. We don't actually own a lot of land. We do own some, but we deliver conservation management across Surrey for some major landowners. One of them is Surrey County Council. Another one is the Ministry of Defence and Surrey Heath Borough Council, as well as private landowners as well and other reserves. We also play a part in the research and monitoring of those sites, as you can imagine, with conservation at the forefront. But also, as Sophie mentioned before, and what Andy was mentioning as well, is public engagement and education is one of the foundation blocks of our organisation. So engaging with the public about anything to do with conservation is really key. And this is one of those aspects, really. Surrey Wildlife Trust manages 7,500 hectares of land in Surrey, of which 4,100 hectares is lowland heathland. Now, just going back to what Andy mentioned about in England per year, wildfire affects 4,600 hectares in any one time within, on average per year. So if that was to happen on our lowland heathlands, we would lose all of our heathland in Surrey in one go to wildfire. So, going on what the risks are and what the effects of wildfire is, this habitat is already really fragile, it's fragmented, and it's a high risk habitat. So we need to ensure that we protect it. And on that note as well, 1% of the world's lowland heathland habitat sits in Surrey. So we actively manage 1% of the world's lowland heathland habitat. And within that area, the map that you can see here, you've got all of our nature reserves, but within the Thames Basin Heaths, it is a high risk wildfire zone. And I'll just very quickly show you on this map. This gives you an idea of where those heathland areas are in Surrey. So we have 4% of land in Surrey is heathland, and it's these big clusters that you can see in purple, and most of it is sitting on the west here. I'm actually sat right here at the moment in the office at Wisley and Ockham Common, more centrally, but as you can see, it extends right down. This is the Berkshire-Surrey border, this is Barossa, and heading down through Purbright Ranges and Brentmoor Heath and Ash Ranges towards Thursley, which we don't manage, but we manage an area on the edge of that. So really going into what lowland heathland is, as a sort of snapshot postcard view, this is a good demonstration. This image here shows you the sort of scrubby mix that you would expect to see on most lowland heathland sites, surrounded by an edge of woodland, or in some cases, as Andy showed, commercial properties, residential areas. But within the actual lowland heathland mix, you've got areas of bare ground, south-facing cliffs, temperate waters, boggy areas, humid heath, going into then very dry heath, where you've got more low-lying scrub, where you've got common gorse, which is this plant here, and then going into dwarf scrub mixes of heather, which you can see in flower here on Chobham Common. And then purple moorgrass is one of the major grassy components, which you can see growing through here. And then silver birch, which you can see in the distance here, mixed in with Scots pine and the ridge in the distance there as well. So that's a snapshot of what lowland heathland looks like in Surrey. And that's the mixture of vegetation types all the way through the landscape. And you did touch on this, but I'll go into a little bit more detail about it with the site of special scientific interest. It gets mentioned a lot, but sometimes people don't fully understand what it might mean. And for me, this is the sort of foundation of what is important about some of our lowland heathland sites. Excuse me. Lowland heathland is rarer than rainforests with regards to its habitat type. So it's diminishing, it's fragmented, and we have about 90% left of what we used to, sorry, we've lost 90% of what we used to have extensively across England and the UK. And that's heathland as well. And within it, now we have these designations of which class different types of fauna and flora, and in those geographical features, it basically encapsulate and layer. This is a snapshot of SSSI designations on the Thames Basin Heath area, and it's for areas of heather, of acid bog areas. So you've got sundews, you've got areas of woodland, broadleaf, Scots pine areas of boggy areas of woodland as well, acid bogs and mire systems, and then the invertebrate assemblage. For example, on Chobham Common, our National Nature Reserve, 50% of all British spider species have been recorded on Chobham Common. So in a very, very small area, there is a high density of biodiversity, of which is really rare and also really fragile. So we're trying to protect that as best we can. And this is one of the designations that helps protect it. Another piece of European legislation, which is quite timely on the exit of, through Brexit of the EU, is the special protection areas in the Thames Basin Heath. Now, this map shows you those areas, and obviously it does border different counties. But the area that we're most interested in, of course, is in Surrey, but we care about all heathland in the UK. And this piece of legislation is protecting our Annex 1 species of ground nesting bird. And the three main important ones to start with are our European nightjar, Dartford warbler, and woodlark as well. But then throw into the mix as well. You've got hobby that migrate here. You've got meadow pipits, tree pipits, snipe. All these species are susceptible to disturbance and nest on the ground. So they need dwarf scrub vegetation to breed, create territories, rear young in, and nest in. So that designation is, one of the highest European pieces of legislation that protects these birds. And we use that to demonstrate how important these sites are. Tied in with that, you've got the special areas of conservation, which basically clump SACs and SPAs together to make up the UK's national site network. And you can see here, you've got Chobham Common down through Purbright Ranges, Ash Ranges, and then into Thursley. And those combined make up the SAC for the Thames Basin Heath. And it's that network of habitats, those large scale habitats, that are so important, because it's got that internationally important habitat collective of all different species and wildlife within it. So again, another important piece of legislation that protects and highlights how important these habitats are. We've also got all 6 native reptiles on our heathland sites in Surrey. Some common species that you'll be familiar with, grass snake, slow worm, common lizard, but then going into the slightly rarer adder, and then the increasingly rare sand lizard, and the incredibly elusive and rare smooth snake. We have all of these on our lowland heathland sites, and like I said, they need the habitat of lowland heathland. So really getting on to what we're here to talk about today is the impacts on that wildlife, on the designations, on the importance of those habitats and how fragile they are, and what impacts we have as a society on those habitats. So we obviously as a Wildlife Trust trying to actively manage these habitats for the maximum amount of biodiversity we can protect that wildlife, and hopefully increase it through connectivity and manipulating the habitat. Lowland heathland habitat requires our fingerprints, our hands to manage it. It's a man-made landscape that requires our interaction. And if we don't interact with it, we'll lose it through succession, because we're always trying to keep it at that pioneer stage, open heathland. If we didn't do anything and just dropped tools and walked away, other than wildfire, which, as Andy has already pointed out, is man-made, we would end up with secondary woodland very, very quickly, and we'd lose this habitat that has evolved over thousands of years. So wildfire coming along hits us usually when everything is emerging, breeding, trying to set up a territory, rearing young, and it's already on a habitat that is very, very small. So it hasn't got most wildlife doesn't have a chance to disperse. So if you're a flower, for example, you've got no chance whatsoever. But if you're an adder, you can only move as quick as your pace is, and trying to outpace a wildfire. I don't really have an experience of that. I'm sure Andy does. And these fires can move very, very rapidly. So wildlife doesn't have a chance, even birds. I'm hoping this link will work now, as I take you to Chobham Common. So if you can't see anything, but this is just a very quick, brief shot of the fire on Chobham Common National Nature Reserve that affected 30 hectares of our National Nature Reserve. But also, this highlights the impact not only on the habitat, the wildlife that was there, but also affected a railway line. It affected quite a busy perimeter road. Residents were evacuated from their homes. And the site was effectively shut down for a week. Dozens of crews, would turn up from all over the place to fight this fire, and it affected 3 different landowners. Surrey Wildlife Trust as the landowner, but also Amphibian and Reptile Conservation working on Sunningdale, which shows here. This is a golf course where it started. It spread over onto the National Nature Reserve, and then onto Wentworth Golf Club, which is also another area of heathland, which was affected as well. So 83 hectares was affected in total in this one wildfire event. And you can see from this map here, very rudimentary map, but this shows the area affected on Chobham Common National Nature Reserve. And this is the area of Wentworth that it spread into, and this is where it started on Sunningdale Golf Course. So just to try and put that in perspective, going back to the designations, it's a National Nature Reserve, it's a SAC, it's an SPA, it's SSSI, and 12% of that SSSI designated area was lost to wildfire within about a day. So all of that work that we put in over years and years and years, going back 10 years, has been lost in minutes, in some instances, if not hours. So the impact was very, very quick. It was a severe fire. All of the conditions were right for a really hot burn, and it spread rapidly across the reserve. And it's not just August last year, the year before, March 2019, 44 hectares, a larger fire, burnt to the south of the site, and ripped right across a large area of lowland heathlands, of which had a really lovely mosaic of habitats. And you can see this is actually a snapshot from the fire itself, and how hot that got. And since then, the site has been slowly recovering, but we still haven't recovered fully. You've also got underground services through here, residential areas surrounding it, a national grid power line across the area. That's that dotted line there. So lots of other things that the Wildfire Service have to take into account. But from a wildlife point of view, a fire in March is horrendous, because you've got, like I mentioned, all of the wildlife trying to establish and start to breed. There are also other impacts. I won't go into too much detail because Andy did such a great job of highlighting all of those, but this just shows you, major roads are closed. The railway line, this is at Chobham again, was closed and affected. This is Ladies' Day at Wentworth Golf Course. 120 local residents were evacuated. So it's not just wildlife, it is us as well. We're affecting ourselves by doing this and make it dangerous for ourselves, residents as well. Smoke inhalation, might lose a home. It can be that severe. Taking to Ash Ranges now, another large estate. This is actually one of the largest estates of lowland heathland that we have. This is military owned. It's a live range. And back in April 2015, 133 hectares were lost to wildfire. The fire actually started up here in the north. I believe, Andy, you said that you attended this fire. So I wasn't working for the Wildlife Trust at this point, but I still see as an active land manager the effects of this fire. Up in the north here, we had our reintroduced sand lizard population up here, which was affected, and Amphibian and Reptile Conservation did a fantastic job working with us to protect those and relocate the affected sand lizards that did survive. We had Dartford warbler territories right through here that were engulfed in flames, and adults trying to set up territories, then this effectively was wiped out. And just showing you that the flora and fauna through here, that what was here was completely removed and devastated by the fire, and lost within minutes. And you can see here, we've got residential areas again here. This is a railway line here. The range floor is down here. So this whole area was lost, and this was a major event. Taking you to the south now, Ulster Common, and this is back in 2011, 13 hectare area burnt. Again, in the context of 133 hectares, doesn't sound very much, but on the scale of the site, this is actually a significant wildfire for this area because it's a relatively small area. Again, a military training area, this is a dry training area. And this slightly different because it affected both dry heathland. This is what the picture shows you immediately in the picture. And then stretching off to distance, that's Thursley National Nature Reserve there. And the fire travelled across and went into Mire habitat, which a lot of people don't usually think is affected. It's sort of, just because it's wet, it skips over. Actually, it's actually worse. It's more detrimental, especially if the fire stays around for a long time and burns deep down into peat. It can have incredibly bad results can come from it because it then exposes peat. And we all are starting to learn about how dangerous that can be for our environment as well, because that's a carbon lock. And that habitat it takes a very long time to recover. And since then, post-wildfire recovery, what we've put in place, I'll just highlight this area here, this compartment. So this is basically the area that was affected on the estate. And we've put livestock out there every year to try and tackle purple moorgrass, Millennia. The regrowth that happens from this plant species is really adaptable and will regrow really, really quickly. Almost, a couple of days after the fire has been put out, if there's water on the ground, this plant will emerge very, very quickly. And it looks like recovery is happening really quickly, but actually it can be a bit of a negative species because it can outcompete other species. And because it's deciduous, year on year, the thatch builds up and then that becomes a wildfire risk in itself. So we deliver conservation grazing there to try and combat that and try and reset it and allow the dwarf scrub to revegetate and take hold, basically. And then this is the same area in 2020, so last year. And you can see the heather is starting to come back. You've still got Millennia dominance in this corner, and this is actually the grazing compartment you can see. And there's areas of bracken that have come back, and common gorse is starting to take over again near the edge of the stream. So there is recovery, but it is a very, very slow process. And as I said at the top here, 2011 is when the fire happens, and we think around 2027 is when we'll get back to the state where that vegetation mix was about there when the fire came across. So another 3 to 6 years in recovery. And so 16 years it might take to fully recover back. And obviously we can't replace all of the invertebrates that we're taking, some of the birds, the reptiles, that they're gone. So we're just talking here about vegetation. So that is a very, very long process for something that could just be started by a barbecue. Also in the Mire habitat, you'll see this is a sort of typical valley mire situation where you've got a lot of purple moorgrass, again, soft rushes. You've also got willow in the background there, but also some of the floristic interests is bog asphodel, you've got devil's bit scabious, you've got meadow thistle, excuse me, and sphagnum moss, which eventually, when created and breaks down, turns into peat very, very slowly. So that's a stereotypical view. This is actually on Barossa. And also I should mention, there are some ferns that will thrive here. This is crested buckler fern, actually, one of the rarest species we have. And we had a fire very, very near there. So this is the same site. This is a 2.5 hectare fire that happened in May. And it spread right across the valley mine. You can see the damage that has been impacted on this wet area. And the purple moorgrass will come back, yes, but all of the sphagnum in the long term will take a very, very long time to recover. And grazing will help with that, but very, very quickly the fire spread across this area. Another impacts worth mentioning because of the estates that we manage is also the impact on public access. Horse riding is a big thing in Surrey, and all of the rights of way, bridleways that we have crisscrossing our lowland heath are really important. And then that's used by dog walkers and walkers alike, and ramblers, and also cyclists as well. And what's worth mentioning is the MOD estate, obviously it's an active military training area. So you've got dry training activities where troops are moving around, but also it's a live range, and wildfires can impact on those as well. So that's, a governing body, military body that is impacted by wildfire as well. So it's a serious business. It's not just conservation that's impacted. And also because we have extensive grazing in these larger reserves, we have livestock out usually at the peak times when we see wildfires. So from any time from March, if the weather's right through to September, we expect to see, we unfortunately see wildfires happening. And so our livestock can be affected as well. Vegetation, very quickly, just this is a sort of snapshot of what vegetation is affected. And you can see here, we've got an area that was previously mown, and we've done bare ground creation for a species called the heath tiger beetle, which we'll come on to. And that area wasn't affected because the fuel loading has been removed. You can see the areas around it. This is on Brentmoor Heath. Has been burnt, and not much vegetation is left, and a lot of that was common gorse that burnt very, very quickly. Dartford warbler like to use that as a larder, basically, an invertebrate larder, and they also nest in it as well. And then post-fire, this is what happens. This is purple moorgrass regeneration within the same year, and this comes up very, very quickly, and then outcompetes the heather that's trying to germinate, which takes 2 or 3 years to germinate. And also bracken is a bit of a thug on lowland heath, and will come back very, very quickly. Another interesting feature, this is on Chobham Common, following that wildfire event in August last year. This is a bare ground scrape, quite a big bare ground scrape with a south-facing cliff. And just interestingly, the fire ripped right across here very, very quickly, heading this direction north. And the vegetation to the north of there was not impacted on, but you can see everything else surrounding it's gone. So the heather was about 3 foot, 4 foot tall, and that's completely gone, whereas the scrape and the bund has been left intact. And fire breaks, although I shouldn't probably use the term fire break, a fuel break where this is annually mown. This is on Barossa again, underneath the power lines here. You can see where the fire has stopped. The fire started down here in the woodlands and spread onto the open heathland back in March 2017. 2.5 hectare fire, so a relatively large fire. And although it was controlled quite quickly, it spread quickly, but the fire breaks worked. These access points, the fire service could get down here. The fire slowed to the edge of here, but very, very slowly. The power lines weren't affected, and it was controlled very quickly. So that's an active management tool that we use. Back to Brentmoor Heath, again, quite a large fire for Brentmoor Heath, being relatively small, and you can see the effects here of all of the vegetation has gone. This fire actually started on Turf Hill, which is owned by Surrey Heath Borough Council. It arced and jumped onto the overhead power lines, National Grid power line, and went over a main road, Red Road, and then started again and jumped onto Brentmoor Heath, and then almost got into Purbright Ranges, which is a 750 hectare exclusion zone. No one can go in there. It's a live firing range, and if the fire got into there, you'd have to firefight it from the edge. So thankfully, the fire service did an incredible job. The fire breaks worked, and it managed to stop it. But we lost the mature heather structure, the scrubby structure that we like. We want to maintain the mossy understory. It's brilliant for reptiles, excellent for a whole suite of invertebrates and our ground nesting birds as well. And just to put that point into context, this is a Dartford warbler nest taken from Brentmore Heath. This is on Brentmore Heath in one of the areas. And you can see one of our volunteers here. You've got knee-high heather, and that is what our Dartfords like to nest in. I say ours because they're resident birds, and in the common gorse in the background here, they do nest in those, but really in Surrey, it's in the vegetation low down that they nest, and so you lose that structure. That habitat is gone for those Dartford warblers, and they can't nest. They don't want to nest on the ground. They want to be suspended. So, you know, a wildfire coming through here would decimate that Dartford warbler population. Now, apologies. I know this is hard to see, but this is what we see on the ground, and this is after corvids, kites and buzzards have moved in straight away after the fire as well. This is what's left. Reptiles do get hit. You know, obviously they can't move quick enough. If they burrow underground and get into a bit of shelter, well, not burrow, but get into holes underground, the wildfire comes across, but then they get suffocated. And so even if they manage to avoid being burnt, they may die from suffocation. So you've got a slow worm here, got an adder, and then a harvest mouse nest as well. So mammals will be affected as well as the invertebrates that I mentioned as well. So you're potentially looking at local extinction. And if it's a particularly notable species, it could be national extinction. So, you know, wildfire events have a massive effect on wildlife as well. Just very quickly, just to show you our collaborative working, this is something that we're looking to improve on, as Andy mentioned, working with all stakeholders to try and engage with local residents, as well as our governing body, Natural England and the Forestry Commission, as well as the landowners like the Ministry of Defence and Surrey County Council and Surrey Heath Borough Council, working with Surrey Fire and Rescue as a land manager to try and improve the wildfire resilience of our reserves so that we deliver conservation, land management conservation on lowland heathlands, but also protecting it, because we now know that if we spend 10 years doing wonderful work for a whole host of species, but sort of forgetting, neglecting the networks that are required, the resilience and the management is required for just maintaining, you know, networks of wildfire fire breaks and access tracks, then we can lose what we've done in minutes. So it's really worth thinking about the overall picture of what we need to do and who we need to work with across our landscape. And just a little piece on some of the species. So this is a heath tiger beetle. You know, this is one of the rarest invertebrates we have, one of the fastest as well. And we have it on a few of our reserves. This is on Brentmore Heath. And this is an area of heather. Again, we stripped to create bare ground. And then we've got areas of cover that's been mown. And this is what heath tiger beetle loves, as well as silver-studded blues as well, another flagship species. And by doing right by these species, we've effectively created a bit of a fuel break here by removing a lot of vegetation. And if a fire came across here, it would slow it down and it would give the fire service an opportunity to fight the fire, and also then know that it will take X amount of time for it to reach the other side before it picks up again. So, you know, having these areas of management are just as important as the fire break network as well. And we also do a huge amount of work with our volunteers, our staff and our contractors in clearing scrub. And that can be on a small scale up to mechanical scale. This is on Chobham Common along one of our fire break networks that we were improving this winter just gone. And this is what we're tackling, common gorse, along with other mixed species like silver birch and Scots pine, willow to some extent as well. So a whole suite of species that we're trying to manipulate and keep the fuel loading down along a fire break. This was a fire break. So we need to keep that fuel loading right down, move it right back. And I mentioned conservation grazing, and this is what they're after, the Molinia, purple moorgrass, and our cattle are there to remove that. That's their primary job, is to keep on top of the grasses so that year on year, that thatch doesn't build up. As well as that, we also have you know, cut and collecting mowing program across our nature reserves. This is on Ash Ranges. This is on the area that was actually burnt, the 133 hectare fire, which we'll go into in a minute. So we cut and collect that area, and so we keep that pioneer heath going, and post fire, keep the fuel load down. This is post fire on a fire in September, where we're doing some bare ground creation. This is burnt ground, and we're just improving the south-facing aspect with more bare ground that's immediately available for things like the bee wolf, this wasp that can burrow into the loose substrate, as well as heath tiger beetle, as I mentioned as well. And woodlark love this habitat as well as burnt habitats as well, so they do like those. And prescribed burning, well, we're not quite there yet. We have done some work on Chobham Common National Nature Reserve, but we've got a long way to go there, and working with people like Andy, we can improve that. And I think fighting fire with fire in the right place at the right time, in winter, in controlled burns is possibly something that we can work with Andy on in the future. And the silver lining, Andy mentioned about species that do well after the fire. And these are some of my examples that I have to show you. So that 133 hectare fire on Chobham on Ash Ranges, this is that fire break that I was showing you, that mown area. And this is a woodlark, one of our ground nesting birds that I mentioned for the SPA. And their territories in 2015, so before the fire or during the fire, excuse me, there were 5 territories, obviously being affected by the fire. Then 2016, 10 territories, so doubled the territories. And in 2017, they have 22 territories of woodlark. Now that is astonishing for this species that is seeing a general decline across Surrey and our heathlands in general. And that is down to the habitat recovering and then starting to grow pioneer heather. And that is what woodlark absolutely love to feed on and nest on. And so they've got 133 hectares effectively of improved habitat for them. Now, not condoning wildfire, and prescribed burning could play a part in this. But until then, what we do is mow these areas to replicate those areas. And that's where we see woodlark using those territories, uses those areas to set up territories and forage on, as well as the existing firebreak network. Our lichens and liverworts and mosses also respond really well to prescribed burning and do recover eventually from wildfire burning. So it's another species that potentially could benefit. And I also should mention as well, on Chobham Common National Nature Reserve, we have the marsh gentian in a few pockets, isolated pockets across the reserve. And this plant seems to respond very, very well to prescribed burning, and they believe it's because the bulb likes the heat and the exposed bare black ground that follows the wildfire, plus all of the vegetation being removed, primarily Molinia again. It allows it to flower more profusely, and with conservation gradients tied in with that and volunteer work as well, the species can do really well. So there are silver linings to wildfire events, but really it's all about prescribed burning, controlled burning. Our public engagement, and this is our new wildfire extreme fire risk sign that's been worked up with the Thames Basin Heath Partnership and Surrey Fire and Rescue as well. So you should now see this on our reserves, and because we had a very, very dry April. Thankfully, we had a bit of rain. And also in our spring edition 2021, we've got an issue, we're raising the issue of wildfire in our magazine. I won't show you now, but there's a link to YouTube here for this actual wildfire event that happened a day before the larger Chobham Common fire. So we saw this coming. This fire actually started within the grazing compartment on Chobham Common. So we had to remove the animals. And then the next day, I think within 24 hours, the larger fire had happened to the north there. And we also do a lot of work on social media, on our website as well, and through talks like this as well. So really, it's about that engagement with local residents in the community. Heath Week is coming up as well, and that's the 24th to the 30th of July. We'll be doing lots of guided walks and things like that with the Thames Basin Heath. But volunteering, we're just about to start back up volunteering with maximum numbers again. So if you haven't, or if you already are a volunteer, brilliant. If you aren't, then come out with us and join us, because the work that we do on our heathlands actually, goes directly into, like I mentioned, wildfire prevention. So it could potentially protect your property or your local landscape. Communication, as I mentioned, social media is becoming more and more important. And citizen science, letting us know about where fires have happened, however small they are. We can map those areas, we can work out where the hotspots are, and we can work with Surrey Fire and Rescue to try and patrol those areas more regularly. So engagement is a real key fundamental component of what we're about. And that's it from me. So I apologise I went on a little bit longer than I was supposed to, but hopefully it was beneficial.
Thank you so much, Ben. That was absolutely fascinating. And nice to get some sort of positive out of such devastation. as well. I'm going to, Andy, if you're around, we'll start taking questions again. That would be brilliant. We've had a few questions in. I'm going to not in the order that they came in, but one of our members said, Ben, this is a really scary picture of potential extinction of wonderful wildlife. What can we as individuals do to reduce this? Brilliant question, Christine. Thank you.
Yeah, I won't go into climate change because I think Andy's touched on that perfectly. This is coming our way and this is man-made. So doing all that you can to reduce your footprint on this planet will help with that directly. Even however small, you'll feel like you're doing something as well. Sometimes it gets lost in the ocean, but actually that's what it's all about. Is everybody does a little bit, that makes the difference. And then I guess locally in Surrey, we're starting to raise, we're a bit of a wildfire campaign, I suppose, and this is sort of marking it and making sure that people are aware of the effects of wildfire and how devastating it can be. And yeah, showing pictures of injured wildlife is one way of doing it, the shock and awe, but also how incredibly rare already these species are in this habitat is. Without wildfire, we are seeing a decline in our wildlife. And that's with all of the conservation work that we've done. We know we need to do more. We need to connect and make better green bridges between all of these different reserves. And building in wildfire resilience into all of that is what we're trying to do. But within our community, it's about, give us a call if you see a fire. If you're worried or concerned about a problem, a local issue in the area, let us know. And we can start to engage with, other groups as well. Thames Basin Heath Wardens, as I mentioned, they're out and about almost every day talking about the SPA and how important it is, but also a whole host of other things get covered in it as well. So, if you're not already volunteering with us, become a member. All of these things tick that box individually, and I think joining in with and engaging with the discussion is really important, but also spreading that word, social media, or just talking to your neighbour about it. Take those small steps, and if you want to take the bigger ones, come along with us as well.
Andy, is there anything else you would like to add to that question?
I think Benny's covered that really, really well, but I mean, I would go back to the eyes and ears. If you're regularly out on the heath, if you're walking your dogs, if you're riding your horse, your push bike, whatever it may be, obviously assuming you're allowed to do those things on these particular areas. If you spot anything, then make people aware. Put in that call. So any smoke that's unattended, if there's nobody with it, then it needs a fire service attendants to investigate. So get those calls in really quickly, because these fires absolutely take off like a rocket. So on the right day. So yeah, everything that Ben said, plus eyes and ears for us, please. Let us know when things are not going as perhaps as they should.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. Right, had a few comments while you were presenting. About one of the comments was, wow, 16 years to recover just the vegetation. I don't know if there's anything to add to that.
I think on that is I'm glad that it was shocking for me to remind myself of that impact, because that's one of the fires that when I started working with Wildlife Trust, that's one of the sites that I picked up and was delivering post-fire recovery, because the implementations had already been put in place. So I was seeing the recovery, and actually I was thinking, am I going to see the end of it before my time, within the Wildlife Trust or beyond? And I think what's key for me is a wildfire is so impactful on land management that we have 10-year management plans for these reserves. And so recovery can span beyond the management plan that is set in place between all of these stakeholders. So there's so much detail and work that goes into them. And then moments later, you have to reassess almost everything within that compartment or half the reserve. Thursley was a big example, a national nature reserve, going up in flames, almost half of it. And Chobham as well more recently, and that's a significant fire. So we have to then assess what the actual implications were and try and calculate it and work it out and what has happened, and how we can stop it. But then reacting to it, do we need to improve the fire break networks immediately now? Are there problems in this particular area? Do we need to graze it next year because the millennia will be prolific in that area? how is the invertebrate assemblage going to have changed, almost dramatically overnight? Have we lost smooth snake from that area now immediately? Are we looking at an extinction? So yeah, that we can put all of the wonderful planning in place, but somebody can come along and do that and it's gone. And I think that's where engagement is so key, because we can do all this work, but really it boils down to people behaving correctly on our reserves and looking out for them. So yeah, again, eyes and ears, as Andy mentioned it, that's key. Brilliant.
Thank you, Ben. Nice to see the woodlark story being very encouraging. That's wonderful. And another interesting question, I think directly for you, Ben. Do MOD activities cause wildfires as well as being impacted from them? That's a great question.
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, the areas that we manage on behalf of the Ministry of Defence are active military training areas. So we have to work with the Defence Infrastructure Organisation to sometimes get us onto site to do the land management that we need to do. So we're very grateful for that. And we also work with their partner organisations as well to deliver that. So that's fundamental. We work together for that anyway. Yeah, I mean, accidents will happen on the training estate, but there is a really robust system that they put in place to make sure that those are, planned for. They have an action plan. They also have their own wildfire indexes for the estate. It's regularly, wardened and maintained by the area safety marshals to deliver those areas. So it's something that's actually, what we do is a relatively small component of a larger complex system that's already in place. They have a 24-hour ops room number. They have a direct link with the emergency services. So yeah, they are a really proactive land manager. And like I say, accidents will happen. They are active training soldiers. So they do need to use their estate to deliver that. But yeah, things do happen, but it's what's in place if those things occur, and also the proactive management that I've mentioned before. It's not just the Wildlife Trust doing stuff as well. It's all of their forestry teams and their management as a whole helps to deliver the entire estate. So yeah, it can happen, but there are plans in place.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. I'm going to jump back to some questions that were asked when you were presenting, Andy, and some sort of general comments. One person said, I never realized there were so many wildfires in just England and so many deliberate. Absolutely terrible. And her next question was sort of directly relating to that. Of what lessons can we learn from native peoples in terms of managing wildfires?
Yeah, I spotted that question, and we've had some really great questions tonight as well. So thanks to the people that have been pushing those in. They are really good. First of all, we forget that Europeans were once native peoples, and we created heathlands and so on at that stage. And we've lost many of those skills. We've forgotten those skills ourselves. There are native peoples around the world that still manage or still want to manage their landscapes using fire. Unfortunately, it was us moving out from from Europe that prevented most of those activities, or at least did our best to prevent them. There is a very large movement within native communities around the world, particularly in Canada, in America, running down through into Australia as well, and of course through Africa, where we're now going back to those native communities to actually listen and to understand the way they've traditionally managed their lands, because they got it right. They'd had thousands of years getting it right, and we came along and decided, nope. And it's the Smoky Bear story. We thought, nope, fire is bad, we're going to stop it, we're going to put it out. And that included allowing native people to burn the land off, and they did it for all sorts of good reasons. Sometimes they would do it, they would, for instance, in Canada, they actually burned to improve fishing. They burn to improve certain food crops, to grow wild food crops. They burn to manage the fuel, because they know that if they don't burn and reduce that fuel, then they are going to get really intense wildfires following that. Most of the reasons they burn are around food, but byproduct of that is it's good fuel management. It creates these, we're always talking about mosaic habitats, and they are key. If we want biodiversity, we cannot have a monoculture of anything. We need biodiversity, we need mosaics. And really that's the key lesson from native people, is that small burns, small regular burns, are critical to fuel management and to good healthy habitats, whether it's forest, whether it's heathland, whatever it may be, even prairie grasslands. If you don't burn prairie grasslands, you get rank grass that just becomes unpalatable, and animals move off, and then it scrubs up and becomes, it's no longer a prairie, it's now woodland. We see that all over the world. And at long last, we are starting to listen to native people. So I think there's a good news story of the future, but we're working on it. It's work in progress. But great question.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andy. Right, I only have 2 questions left at the moment. Well, one is more of a comment. So if anyone else would like to slip in a question, I appreciate we're running over time, but this is absolutely fascinating. And obviously, if you had to go off and do other things, then we won't be offended. And you can always see the end of the Q&A when we post it online. So yeah, last call for questions, and I'm going to address the questions from Christine again. She just said thank you, it was very interesting, Andy. It was obviously after your first talk. I'm sure she's thanking you too, Ben. And scary at the same time. I'm absolutely with you, Christine. I felt a wealth of emotions watching that, and not all good. And her question is, do you go into schools, etc., to spread the message? I'll direct that to Andy first.
The answer is yes. And again, it's really good to see that that's a growing part of what various groups do. So I work very, very closely with the Urban Heath Partnership. They have 2 full-time education officers for the southeast of Dorset. And they go into schools at various different age groups and different levels. This is very much the southeast of Dorset. I can't speak really for Surrey at this stage. And they've got a whole range of different activities, from field trips where the youngsters come out into the field, to them going into the schools and doing things. And when they move up into the sort of secondary school, one of the things that I've taken part in and have quite enjoyed as well, they do a bit of role play, and they do what they call a courtroom drama, where somebody is nominated the judge, and they give the judge the wig and the cloak and everything, and the clothes. There will be somebody that's the fire setter, if you like. There will be a prosecution lawyer and a defense lawyer, and then the rest of the class become the jury. And they'll show a video scenario where this young person goes and sets fire to stuff, and lo and behold, whoever they've chosen to be the potential arsonist ends up with the same hoodie and etc. that the person in the video was wearing. And they'll try them, and they'll present the evidence, and they'll listen to the evidence. They're always guilty. They always get hung, or whatever it may be. They're never very lenient children. They determine the sentence, and it's usually death by hanging. But it's actually brilliant. It gets them to think. But the key part of it is to consider the consequences. This person set a fire for a bit of fun. They ended up with a criminal record, and then the discussion goes on to say, well, do you know that if you've got a criminal record, you're not allowed into the United States of America? So if you're planning to go to Disneyland, you're not allowed. You've now ruined that because you set fire to Heathland and you've got a criminal record. And it's things like that they look at. It's the drama itself is a little bit of fun, and then they look at the consequences, and it leads to other work. So lots and lots of really good stuff going on. I know that Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service, again, have an education team. I've just been helping them write some new, fresh education material, and fire rescue services across the UK do the same. I'm also aware that the Wildlife Trusts, and I'll let Ben explain perhaps what they do, but the Wildlife Trusts across the UK are very proactive in this area as well.
Thank you, Andy. Ben, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think this is definitely something that we need to, pick up the momentum with as well, because we are engaged with our, the general public in Surrey anyway, and the demographics that we can access through our education team anyway. I think we could do more. what I think we should be doing. So I think as well, we'll be working with the Thames Basin Heath Partnership, who are basically designing a heathland education pack, basically. I think that could be bolted on to quite easily, and then engage with it. So yeah, we should be doing more with that, I think. And we have done similar things in the past where we've had issues with livestock, for example, in a very certain area. We've gone out and basically gone to each school to try and raise that awareness. And I think that's where we can do that. So yeah, we could. I do think Dorset are definitely leading the way there, and we can learn a lot from them as well. But the other thing as well, we have just been formed part of the Surrey Wildfire Resilience Forum with Surrey Fire and Rescue, and so we're starting to build on that now. So hopefully, with their new positions in place, we can build on it and build an education and engagement part of that as well.
Brilliant, absolutely with you in that, and that a fascinating way of sort of getting into the schools, Andy. Very, very effective, I imagine. And if you've got sort of any stories or anything like that, we'd love to share them on social media, because it is so important to get that message out there in any way we can. So if there's anything you can think of, just let us know. We're all in this together, because it's something we all feel very passionate about, and makes me want to take action. Not become a firefighter, though, I can safely say that. Wonderful. I don't have any more questions, just a couple of comments saying thank you to both of you. Fascinating, scary, super presentations and information. The role play is a brilliant one. Absolutely with you, Christine, especially linked to direct personal consequences. Absolutely, that you're not going to Disneyland. Gosh, what an effect that must have. So I have no further comments or questions at the moment, apart from Laura said, thank you very much. Incredibly interesting. Many thanks. Is there anything either of you would like to say before we sort of sign off for the evening? And actually saying that, I have one question. And I know we've kind of touched around what we can do. So if there's one really key action that everyone watching can take away and do from tonight to help, what would it be? Andy, your turn.
I think I've already said my piece about that 999 core early intervention, but I think if people go and consider what they can do in their own home around the Firewise principles, thinking about the safety of their own home, that I think that's a really useful thing to do, because it will actually give them some peace of mind. If they live alongside a heathland site, just go off and think about what you can do. When did you last check how much rubbish is in your gutters? Because now's the time to get rid of it, because it will be sat there dry. So that kind of thing, easy to do. Help your neighbours if necessary, but think about your own, what you can do at your home in a Firewise kind of way.
Brilliant, thank you. Ben?
I'm going to do a partner plug again. I think available now, and how valuable engagement is, and making us aware of what's going on, and going out into your local patch and engaging with that. The Thames Basin Heath Partnership are working with Surrey Fire and Rescue and with heathland hounds. So you don't necessarily have to have a dog, but basically there are a group of volunteers who are building up their skills with the partnership so that they can identify exactly what Annie mentioned about don't go and fight the fire, but ring 999 immediately, because the difference between a minute and 4 is massive. It can be something that can be contained very, very quickly and spread very quickly. So, yeah, I think immediately now that is available to you. So it's definitely worth it. It's mostly available on Facebook, but if you go and look on their website, look on our website, and there's a direct link to the Thames Basin Heath as well. And if you've got a local patch near you, a local heathland patch near you, go and familiarise yourself with it. And let us know if there's any problems on that patch. Patrolling that area, a sense of ownership is always really, really good for it, because it reinvigorates you to look at something slightly differently And also you start to have more of a passion for the area, whether it's littering or whether it's somebody leaving a barbecue or a smouldering cigarette, whatever it is. Yeah, just adding to that would be great. And yeah, go and enjoy heathlands as well. That's the main thing, is go and immerse yourself in that. And I'm sure we've all been doing that last year, but let's make sure that we can keep doing that as well.
I love that concept. Yeah, let's take ownership of this. It's wonderful, really wonderful. Okay, I'm going to just finish with a couple more comments. Thank you both for wonderful presentations and so informative. Thank you all for the educational and inspiring evening. Absolutely right. So inspired by tonight. And thank you to both of you for doing such an incredible job. And Andy, putting your life online regularly. You're a remarkable hero in my eyes. And Ben, thank you for putting on all the fire breaks and doing all the incredible conservation management you do for the Trust. You're a real asset to us. So I'm going to sign off and say, go out, enjoy your heathlands, and remember what has been said. Call 999 really, really quickly. And don't try to tackle it yourself if you don't feel safe. So thank you very much for joining us. Yeah, go and enjoy heathlands. Thames Basin Heath Partnership will be running Heath Week, as Ben said. So there'll be lots of socially distanced walks, hopefully a little bit more relaxed now. But go out, explore, enjoy. And we have online talks as well about heathlands. So let's take ownership of this incredibly rare habitat and help wildlife. Good night, and thank you all for coming. See you again soon.
Thank you.